I've been a fan of great cartoon The Loud House ever since the first episode aired here in the UK at the end of May 2016, the show having premiered in the US earlier that month. For as long as the show has been running, I've been enjoying the antics of Lincoln, his sisters, and their friends. Not only does the show offer fun episodes like Left in the Dark, Pulp Friction, Spell It Out, No Spoilers, House of Lies, and Hero Today Gone Tomorrow, but we also get episodes that teach morals, and teach them very well, such as Back in Black, Friend or Foe, Roadie to Nowhere, and Really Loud Music. In fact, Deal Me Out is one of my favourite episodes because it teaches a moral that not enough other shows teach. For the 5th season, it was decided that the Louds will age up a year. Laurie would start college, Lily would start preschool, and Lincoln would start middle school. The subject of Lily starting preschool was previously touched on in Potty Mouth. Lincoln starting middle school was brought up in Study Muffin and Middlemen, and Laurie starting college was brought up in The Loudest Mission Relative Chaos, City Slickers, and Driving Ambition. As a result, we all knew that the Louds would move up in education eventually. But there was one episode in particular that premiered 5 years ago today that really got to me. Don't you forget about me. I don't know what to think of this episode. The episode starts with Laurie getting more mail from the golfing college she was granted the chance to go to in Driving Ambition. This mail prompts her and her family to go for a visit. We see the family tour the campus, Lincoln hang out with Ronnie Ann, who's there because her uncle Carlos is giving a guest lecture, and Lenny, not wanting Laurie to leave home because of how reliant she is on her, executes her plan to prevent Laurie from going. First by trying to discourage her, and when that didn't work, she decided to put the staff off letting her in by impersonating her. Her plan works, but then at the last minute, she's faced with having to undo her misdeed, meaning Laurie can go. On one hand, I should hate this episode because Lenny defied her nicey-nicey characteristics in her bid to keep her older sister Laurie from getting into college. But on the other hand, this episode really rubbed in that Laurie would soon be leaving for college. This triggered me because my own college years were awful. Before we go further, I'd like to assure you that despite Schooled being an absolutely terrible way to start Season 5, except Lily and Lenny's plot, which I thought was decent, I welcome the age up with open arms. Season 5 was great as ever. Season 6 built on that, keeping the show as funny and well written as it ever was. And with the show now in its 9th season, it's still going strong, even having a few road trip multi-part episodes. And to see Laurie taking a gap year and having moved back in with her parents and siblings, this is most welcome. In my opinion, The Loud House should end around season 10 or 11. I'd like to see episodes that give closure to series-long gags. I'd like to see one last Ace Savvy-centred episode. I'd like to see Laurie graduate Fairway University. And I'd like the final episode to be an hour-long 10 years later special in which Lincoln and Ronnie Ann get married. It may be sad to see a good show end, but I'd rather a good show end on a good note than go on and on long after it enters seasonal rot. Now, before I can explain why my college years were bad, I feel I need to give a brief explanation of my school years. I was a good little boy in infants, but in juniors I became a resentful meanie. My resulting bad behaviour would eventually cause me to, in 1999, be sent to an awful boarding school for what was left of my primary education and my entire secondary education. At that boarding school, where I boarded during the week, going home for each weekend, I had to deal with staff who didn't get modern young people. Not all of them were like that. I couldn't play video games or watch TV as much as I could at home. They didn't even have cable or satellite. And they made me go on outdoor activities on many nights, whether I wanted to do them or not. They even made me do more homework than I'd have had to do if I weren't a boarding student. My life and times at those school boarding quarters felt like I had been sent to prison. I was at that faraway school because I was badly behaved at the school I was attending. At the boarding quarters, I was frequently prevented from doing the things I liked to do and forced to do things I didn't like. So it adds up. Before we go further, I must bring up that because of how scarred I am from my time at that boarding school, Future Tense is so far the only Loud House episode I decided to skip. And that live-action Loud House spin-off series, and the 2 live-action movies, I'd rather pretend those don't exist. After finishing Year 11 in the summer of 2004, I started sixth form in September that year. In addition to my boarding nightmare continuing, the sixth form itself clearly wasn't right for me. Sixth form is supposed to be the next step up from your school education, but my school's particular sixth form felt more like nursery. We were taught stuff most people will have already learned, either at school or during their own time outside school. Also, the ASDAN work we did was so redundant. I don't remember much of it, but I can remember it involving work on life skills most people will have already learned by age 16, writing about days out, and so on. Behind the scenes, my parents knew I wasn't enjoying my time at this sixth form, so they looked for a college someone with my learning disability could go to. On November 10th, 2005, by which time I had earned my ASDAN Bronze Award and was working towards my Silver Award, which, spoilers, I didn't stay at sixth form long enough to get, my mom took me out of the southeast of England for a night in a faraway hotel. The very next morning, she took me for an interview at Swindon College in, obviously, Swindon, which is in Wiltshire. All the way in the western part of the country. Yes, she found a college for me, but it was all the way over there in a part of England not too far from Wales. Rather than just being a student at the college itself, I would be going there through the nearby autistic unit, who aren't directly related to them, but provided an outlet through which people with high-functioning autism could go to college. The college itself didn't have halls, or dorms as you Americans call them, but the autistic unit did have 2 boarding houses. And in comes my first red flag. Not only would I be boarding, but whereas my current boarding school situation meant I could go home every Friday, at college I would only be able to go home every other Friday. Not every member of the autistic unit boarded. Some of them lived locally, but those who did board came from all over England and Wales. At the time, my favourite TV channel was Jetix, a channel that was only available via cable and satellite. My favourite shows on Jetix at this point included Sonic X, the 2003 version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go, and a then more recent addition to the channel, Alpha Teens on Machines. It was bad enough not being able to watch Jetix or play Xbox Live during the week with my existing boarding education, but to have even less of a chance to do these things was terrifying. Our Sky Plus box at the time could only hold up to 20 hours worth of recordings, so I couldn't record too much at any one time. Sometime after this trip to the west of England, I did get an interview at a local college, which if I could attend, I wouldn't have to board. But that didn't work out because I was apparently anxious during the interview. I don't remember behaving in such a manner. Maybe I was anxious because I wanted to go there instead of far away. But either way, I ended up not being accepted. As a result, college in the west of England through the autistic unit was set in stone. Not immediately, however, so I had to continue going to the Go Nowhere sixth form into 2006. I wouldn't get to go to college until either April or September that year. In February that year, my parents and I went on vacation in Florida, half of which was spent at Walt Disney World. When we got back to our home in the southeast of England, I don't remember if it was an answering machine message or if we got the phone call on the spot, more likely the former, but we got word that I would get to go to college in April instead of having to wait until September. I told my classmates in sixth form upon returning, and that gave us time to prepare for my last week there at the end of March. That last week involved some festivities, one of which was a session of bowling and arcade games at the local bowling alley. My last night within the boarding area included dinner in front of the TV, watching one of my all-time favourite shows, The Simpsons. After which some of us sang karaoke while others played video games. And on my last day at the sixth form itself, I was presented with a book of memories that they made specially for me. Not only that, but also at some point during that week, one of my friends, who I had at the school since I started, he was in the year below me, even gave me some Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Sadly, that friend of mine died of cancer on September 29th, 2015. Our bond will never be forgotten. Before we go further, I would like to point out that even though my Nokia N-Gage, yes, that infamous gaming phone, was still serving me just fine as my cell phone, keep in mind I never had a cell phone period before I got it for my 16th birthday in 2003, and I even bought a game for it during the trip to Florida I just spoke of, my mom felt I needed to have a proper cell phone for college. So she gave me her old Motorola V500 as a hand-me-down. My first night within my college boarding accommodation was Easter Monday. Despite my despair, I did feel good making a few friends from the get-go. Since it turned out they were gamers, just like me, we were able to start our friendship with a multiplayer game of Tales of Symphonia. I never owned this game myself, so one of my new friends popped his copy into my system. Since I couldn't start a proper college course until September, my first few months at this college involved a Learn Computers course, known as CLATE, even though I already had rather good computer skills, and some English classes. As I progressed into my time at college, I found myself raising more red flags with the autistic unit. The internet was heavily censored, so I couldn't go on many of my regular sites. I couldn't go on free auction website Swap It Shop, which closed in 2017, and I couldn't get my multiple times a day gaming news fix from Eurogamer. For my gaming news, I had to instead turn to Game Central on teletext. My next red flag was that for 2 nights a week, the autistic unit required their members, whether they boarded or not, to go to their base room for an evening gathering, each one involving dinner and an activity. Why was this bad? During these sessions, they didn't allow us to use our cell phones or play video games, period. It was bad enough my boarding school limited when I could play video games, but to not be allowed to play video games or use my cell phone at all on some of my college nights, that was awful. My parents bribed me to put up with it by raising my allowance from £15 a week to £17 a week. Sorry to skip ahead a bit, but thankfully these evenings did not continue when college resumed after the summer. To make matters worse during these first few months, some of my new friends turned against me. One of them, my own roommate, turned against me most likely because he wasn't used to having a roommate. And the boy who previously let me play Tales of Symphonia and Sonic Riders with him started to dislike me and started excluding me from his gaming sessions with the others. How could he treat me this way? I have the same favourite Mario character as him, Yoshi. Don't get me started about the Sunday where he had a session of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, but excluded me while still letting 2 others join him. I was so lonely. Also at some point during these first few months of college, a new Jetix show premiered, Galactic Football. Having enjoyed CITV soccer cartoon Hurricanes as a preteen, I was really excited for this new cartoon about the beautiful game, and when I watched it, it didn't disappoint. Despite only being home every other weekend, I did still record and watch as much of the show as I could. How do I feel about CITV having closed 2 years ago? I did 3 whole videos on that subject. You can find them in my channel here on YouTube. Shortly after college ended for the summer, my parents wanted to make it up to me for having to spend over 3 hours in the car going to and from college, so they bought me a PSP. I already could game on the go thanks to my Nintendo DS and my small collection of older handhelds, but not only was the PSP a game machine, I could also watch UMD videos of movies and TV shows on it, which explains why they got it for me. When college started again in September, this time in their new building as their old building closed just before the summer break, I started my first full course, Level 1 Diploma in Digital Applications. In addition to the lectures relevant to the course subject, we also did a GCSE course in math. My boarding school didn't do GCSEs, the education they did give us just wasn't very fulfilling. I made a new friend also on the course, also going through the autistic unit and boarding at the same house as me, and also a gamer. But it wasn't long before our friendship soured. The only consoles he wanted to own were whatever Nintendo consoles were current, and the only games he would play were first-party Nintendo franchises and just 4 non-Nintendo franchises: Sonic, Monkey Ball, Rayman, and The Sims. He questioned me over my choice to have a collection of consoles, old and new, as opposed to only owning the current Nintendo consoles. He questioned me over why I mostly play older games on their original hardware as opposed to GameCube compilations and the Wii Virtual Console. He questioned me over why I like to buy American and Japanese import games as opposed to only buying domestic UK releases. He questioned me over why all my Wii Virtual Console purchases were TurboGrafx titles, TurboGrafx being a console that didn't have much of a presence in Europe. He questioned me over why I'd want to check out game franchises outside his comfort zone, such as Bonk. He even got at me for buying the Xbox version of Sonic Riders instead of the GameCube version, just because there's a GameCube version. Why limit yourself over what games you can play when you really don't need to? Before we go further, I'd like to assure you that following the arrival of Neo Geo, Commodore 64 and arcade games on Wii Virtual Console at later dates, I did buy some of those. At one point, our grudge got so bad that my mom warned me that I could be sent back to the Go Nowhere sixth form where I went before. I couldn't stand the thought of that. Luckily, that didn't happen. I did still make one good new friend that year, who like me is a gamer and a Simpsons fan, and was boarding at the same house as me. However, she was doing a different course. Fair enough. We spent a lot of time together, gaming and watching TV, and not just The Simpsons. I still remember who her favourite characters from certain franchises are. Favourite Final Fantasy character? Sephiroth. Favourite Avatar character? Zuko. Favourite Ben 10 alien? Accelerate. However, as the college year progressed, at one point during which I broke my Motorola V500 out of anger one night, after which my parents gave me a Samsung D600 that belonged to my brother, my situation got no better. It really didn't feel fair not having a choice of college.
Just because you have a learning disability
doesn't mean you should have to go far away for your education. I really couldn't cope with the internet censorship getting worse and worse, and to make matters worse, they didn't allow students to connect their laptops to the internet as it was a way around their censorship. I didn't have my own laptop, otherwise I would have broken that rule many times. To make matters worse, remember I said we could only go home every other weekend? One time, we had to stay for 2 weekends in a row. In light of this news, my parents bought me a copy of then recent Nintendo DS release, Pokemon Ranger, and in exchange wanted me to cope with having to stay at college for 2 weekends in a row. Was I grateful for the game? Yes. Did I cope with being away for 2 weekends in a row? No. Like I would tell my parents. The college year ended with me and my classmates completing the Level 1 Diploma in Digital Applications course and the GCSE Math course. It wouldn't be until sometime during the summer break that we would be told what our grades on the math course would be. I got a C grade, and one of my classmates got a B grade. I knew that because they left a voicemail for him on my cell phone by mistake. While I am grateful for my GCSE in math, because I have problems with large bodies of text, there is no way I could do a GCSE in English. The summer break was good. We went to a Centre Parcs in France for a week. I saw the Simpsons movie and Surf's Up at the cinema. I enjoyed Jetix's It's My Summer programming. And over on BBC Three, I enjoyed the new episodes of Family Guy. I really wasn't looking forward to going back to college. More being away from home, more putting up with internet censorship, and general post-summer break syndrome. This time, I would be at the autistic unit's other boarding house for more independent students. There was only room for 5 students, and there were times when we would work on independent living skills. The first month of the college year was awful. In addition to having the same problems as before, the internet was more censored than it was before. Before, YouTube was only partially blocked. This time around, it was blocked completely. Not only that, but one of the non-boarding members of the autistic unit, a good friend of mine, started boarding. Before the summer break, he said he wanted to start boarding, and got his wish at the start of this college year. He was boarding at the house where I boarded before. I have no idea what he was thinking. I don't want to reveal too much else in one go, but I will say before we continue that the only saving grace was that my family gave me a Freeview box, so that on the TV in my bedroom,
I was no longer stuck with just the basic 5 channels. Now I could start my day with the CITV channel's Action Stations block
and finish my day with Family Guy on BBC Three. Course-wise, I did start off doing Level 2 Diploma in Digital Applications, but because shortly into the course I had to do a piece of work that was exactly the same as one I already did in Level 1, I switched to BTEC First Diploma in ICT. The first two projects on BTEC First Diploma in ICT were computer systems and something involving basic programming. I don't remember the exact project title. The basic programming project I got on with just fine, but the computer systems project was too difficult for me. I had to deal with jargon I couldn't understand, and the tutor didn't accept my answers to some of the questions he asked me. The two projects each had a different tutor. On top of the issues I already had with my situation, the student whose room mine was next to at our new boarding house was very problematic. He was one of the boys who did want to be my friend when I first started, but turned against me. This time around, he was getting at me for ranting about boarding, which he saw as the best thing ever. Like me, he went to at least one boarding school, but he loved it. He before told me he went to 5 different schools and was bullied at all of them. I don't see how he could possibly have loved boarding, with stricter rules than you'd get at home, no Sky TV, and whatnot. One night, I brought up that the college year before, 2 other students believed the Tailstole curse from Sonic R was real, but in the end found out they were wrong, and I simply added, "It's just a video game, completely harmless." However, my words caused him to intervene by saying, "There is one game that turns people violent, Manhunt. Trevor McDonald said so." He was referring to a violent incident in 2004 between 2 young individuals who played the game. Most of the press here in the UK were blaming video games for real-life violence and other bad things for as long as they did. They clearly couldn't come up with anything better to report. Manhunt is a game much too violent for my liking, but I still knew that no matter how violent, video games do not cause real-life violence. I don't know why I didn't respond to that boy's words that night as much as I should have, but deep down I felt that I could no longer trust him. At one point that month, he not only got at me again for hating boarding student life, but he went as far as to order me to start enjoying it. He added that if I did, he would buy me the Simpsons movie on DVD when released. I didn't say anything at first. I don't know why, but at a later date, I told him, "You can keep your Simpsons movie DVD. I plan to get it on Blu-ray disc," even though I had nothing capable of playing Blu-ray discs at the time. Before long came the last college day of the month. My anger with boarding had built up severely, and I was really struggling with the computer systems project, which was what our first lecture was on Fridays. I don't remember what the schedule for that part of the course was outside Fridays. Also, the lecturer on the computer systems project would always get at students for being even slightly late, myself included. The lecture started. At one point, the lecturer asked me yet another question I couldn't find an answer to. He got at me over the answers I gave him, and it got so serious that I ran out the room and texted my mom about how upset I was. Unsurprisingly, he got at me for using my phone during the lecture. I don't know how I was able to make it to the break period, but during the break I strongly considered dropping out. Suddenly, I decided to go over to student services, return my student ID, and tell the clerk that I wanted out. I don't remember everything the clerk said to me, but the bottom line was that rather than granting me an early exit, he or she gave me the option of going for first certificate in ICT instead of first diploma, which I accepted. From that point until the next 2 course projects, I would only attend the lectures on basic programming, not on computer systems. In hindsight, I should have told that boarding-loving boy about why my boarding school years were awful. I should have properly explained that video games don't cause real-life violence, even excessively violent titles like Manhunt, and I should also have told him, don't ever have kids. They'll hate you for trying to force your pro-boarding bullshit on them. If I was a bit more heroic that horrible last college day of September 2007, I would have, while the lecture was still going, unplugged the computer I was working on, as opposed to logging off and shutting down properly, and stormed out of the room, shouting, I can't take it anymore, gone to the college library and used one of the computers there to type a letter of resignation, placed my student ID and the letter on the desk at student services without saying anything, and told the staff at the autistic unit that I didn't want to go to college far from home anymore. I also would have told them about my awful boarding school years prior to starting college. I also would have pleaded to my parents to let me have another chance at getting into the local college I mentioned earlier. It would also have helped if, at the time, 1. I knew that a letter of resignation could be as simple as, I no longer wish to do this, and 2. I knew about gap years, which are when you take 1 year off college. At some point in what was left of 2007, I got a PlayStation 3, and for Christmas that year, I got the Simpsons movie on Blu-ray disc. I still have that PlayStation 3 and Simpsons movie Blu-ray disc to this day. 2008 arrived, and the college IT department was making preparations for a trip to Paris, France. The trip involved 2 days at Disneyland Paris, and 1 day going around Paris itself doing other things. Any student doing an IT course could go, but places were limited, and it did cost each student wanting to go. The autistic unit set up a group so they could take 7 of their students on this trip, and they would pay for us, and I got to be part of it. The trip was scheduled to take place the first week of college after February half-term, and throughout the weeks leading up to it, meetings took place, not between other students going on the trip, just those within the autistic unit and the accompanying staff members. During these meetings, we would discuss who would sleep in which of our 2 hotel rooms, what fundraising activities we should do so we have more spending money, and some other odds and ends. I don't remember what else we did as part of that fundraising, but one morning we sold tomato and basil soup. I made some preparations of my own. I already had the Talkman language translation software for my PSP, but in addition, I got myself a copy of the Passport to Paris guidebook software for my system, part of Lonely Planet's Planet PSP range, released in late 2006. Then came that meeting. The leader of the group told us some stuff that made the trip seem less appealing to me.
The big deal breaker is that she told us she won't allow us to take our electronics out and about during the trip, and would make us leave them in our hotel rooms.
The lone exception being our cell phones, which we were required to have on us at all times. Her words caused me to leave the room shouting, "Oh, that's it! I'm not going on the Paris trip!" The boy who absolutely loved boarding, who I mentioned earlier, he was part of the group and angrily told me not to back out. I already had one bad Disney vacation in February 2007 due to my parents babying me a bit, unaware of how much better I had gotten at looking after myself since starting college. I didn't want to have another in 2008. Being autistic should mean less rules, not more. I broke the news to my mom that I no longer wanted to go on this Paris trip, but she still wanted me to go. She even offered to buy me some additional games for my phone, to make up for not being allowed to have my PSP or DS on me while outside the hotel, and an English and French foreign phrase book to make up for not being able to use my PSP's Talkman language translation software, but I still said no. Before long, my decision not to go on the trip was set in stone, and they let another student go in my place, and even rearranged who would be sleeping in which hotel rooms. The college Paris trip happened, as scheduled, and because I wasn't part of it, February half-term, which normally lasts 1 week, lasted a few days longer that year for me and everyone else not going. IT students at least. Not long before we went on a 2-week break in the spring, which that year was just after Easter rather than coinciding with Easter for some reason, I had completed the 2 projects on my course that came after the first 2. As a result, I had completed 3 projects and skipped 1. Therefore, I had done enough for BTEC First Certificate in ICT. Because of this, I wanted to end my college year right there, but the staff at the autistic unit didn't let me. They wanted me to go for the full first diploma, which involved doing the 2 remaining projects and the computer systems project I originally skipped. I would continue to attend lectures as normal, and spend time outside those lectures doing the computer systems work.
In more recent years, my mom told me the reason I was prevented from leaving college early on that occasion was because she and Dad paid up front for me to be at this college for 3 1/3 years, which I think is stupid. Education is not a commodity, it's a necessity, and therefore not something private companies should be allowed to meddle with. Not to mention, I wanted to leave college early, and that was my decision, and therefore I should have been granted it. Maybe if I was a bit more assertive, my request might have been granted. Who knows?
That computer systems work was difficult, but I did get there in the end.
To this day, I still remember what the CITV Action Stations lineup was when college started again after the spring break.
Sam Sam, Captain Flamingo, Transformers Cybertron, Stormhawks, and Tom and Jerry Tales, each of which I remember very fondly. Another good thing I will say about that college year was that I did make another friend boarding at the house where I boarded before. On some of my visits to that other house, I joined her in watching some comedy shows I wasn't already watching. The Catherine Tate Show, Star Stories, and The Mighty Boosh. Also at some point, I got to meet Paddington Bear at the shopping centre in town. I don't have a pic of myself with Paddington, but I was able to get this pic of him as he was going for a break. Another good thing, one Saturday during those last few months of college, I and other students within the autistic unit got to go on a trip to Chessington World of Adventures. I got worried when I found that the same staff member who ran the Paris trip group was at the helm. Luckily, she did not carry her rule against bringing your electronics out with you on that trip over to this one. However, I feel I must also add, it was a good thing I wasn't boarding at the same house I was before. At that house, most of the students wanted a new rule for the TV in the lounge area. The TV had to be off between 10:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, and TV before 10:30 a.m. had to be news only. This rule didn't apply to TV in students' bedrooms, and it didn't apply at the house where I was boarding, but I can't stand the thought of hearing depressing news in the morning.
I don't want to start my day hearing about mass killings overseas.
I want to start my day with cartoons. As the college year was wrapping up, I was given the option of having my time in the autistic unit extended for another year so that I could do BTEC National Diploma in ICT, which would take 2 years. I said no and decided that for my final year I would do BTEC First Diploma in Business, with the hopes that one day I would get to start my own business. The summer break was good. I saw Kung Fu Panda and Wall-E at the cinema. Jetix debuted a great new cartoon, Combo Niños, and at one point my family and I went to Center Parcs in De Kempervennen, which is in the Netherlands. At some point during that trip, we went to Eindhoven, and it was at a game store in that city where I bought my copies of Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Wii and Mario Tennis for the Nintendo 64. Before we knew it, September came and it was back to college. This time, the autistic unit had acquired another house for boarding students who were more independent, and I and 4 others would be boarding there. The college year started off pretty well, or as well as it could, because I still had to put up with the same bullshit as before.
BTEC First Diploma in Business was a much easier course than BTEC First Diploma in ICT, and it felt good knowing that this was my final year at college.
At one point, my college class and I were taken on a trip to Thorpe Park, and we had a blast. When we stopped for a break at one point, one of the accompanying staff members noticed I was playing Crazy Taxi Fare Wars on my PSP.
Crazy Taxi being a game she remembered from the PlayStation 2.
As part of October half term, to make up for the college Disney trip having had rules I didn't agree with, causing me to back out, my parents took me on a trip to Disneyland Paris of our own. I had much more fun on that trip than I would have had on the trip with college. Unfortunately, shortly after college resumed in November, I found myself raising more red flags. On November 11th, after watching my morning's worth of cartoons, I was introduced to my new key worker, seeing as the key worker I was given at the start of the year wasn't always available for me. While all the key workers I had throughout my time at college up to that point had all been good to me, this new one really didn't get me. After I openly said that I started my day with cartoons, like I usually do, she slightly angrily asked me, "Don't you ever watch the news?" And I told her no. Her response, "You need to know what's going on in the world." How could she not know that those with autism are not so likely to want to watch frightening programming? Autistic or not, it's down to you what you watch on TV in the morning. Whether it's the news, those old American comedies Channel 4 air at that time of day, cartoons intended for the 6 to 12 demographic, or even programming meant for the under 6 demographic. My choice is cartoons for the 6 to 12 crowd, and that's my choice. I especially feel good for having tuned into Action Stations that morning. They aired part 1 of Ben 10 3-part special, Secret of the Omnitrix, the Accelerate version. Accelerate being the favourite alien of a good friend of mine I mentioned earlier. I told her after the morning lectures, and she was very pleased to hear it. Back to my new key worker. While out in town, she frequently took me to pound shops, telling me I needed to get used to cheap shops, not thinking that I could get a well-paid job or that I'd rather save my money for higher quality products. She wouldn't let me play my handheld consoles on the bus, but I still did, simply ignoring her. She also told me to make more grown-up choices in entertainment,
with no respect for my decision to instead watch TV shows
intended for preteens, just like many autistic adults. You may recall me establishing earlier in this video that in addition to cartoons aimed at preteens, I do like to watch adult comedy shows such as Family Guy and Little Britain, but serious adult programming, whether violent action shows or those soaps, just isn't within my comfort zone. I will assure you, however, that I do still like to play games with a mid-level of violence, such as Street Fighter and Metal Slug. She even made me buy things I didn't want or need to. She once made me buy a newspaper for a reason I don't remember, and she once made me buy a pair of sunglasses even after I told her my mom was going to send me a pair over from home. I did put my foot down here and there, but I could have done a better job. Why didn't I simply declare that I didn't want to go to college anymore because of my bossy key worker?
the wireless local area network switch on my PSP broke.
It could still go online, but it wasn't easy to turn on and off. Therefore, I took it to a repair shop. Unfortunately, after over a month of waiting, and even though I showed them on a website the repair part I thought I needed, they didn't fix the PSP. They did get the switch to click into place again, but wireless communications no longer worked at all. They still didn't fix it even after I asked them to fix it again and again until the end of the college year. Even though I gave them plenty of chances to fix that PSP, I did, after the first non-repair, just get a new 3000 series system. Behind the scenes, my parents knew I wasn't liking my new key worker. They did tell the higher-ups at the autistic unit, but nothing was done about it. One good thing I will say is that come my 21st birthday, nearer the end of 2008, I no longer had to put up with only having a feature phone, because I got my very first iPhone, the iPhone 3G, which was the second model. Now I could surf the internet anywhere at my leisure without having to deal with college internet censorship. Sadly, it wouldn't let me use sites that rely on Flash. Had I been able to go to a local college, meaning I would not have had to board, I would have continued using feature phones for a few more years and gotten my first iPhone maybe in 2010, so the iPhone 4 would have been my first. With the 2008-2009 academic year being my last as a college student, my parents wanted to move me into supported living. They eyed a place in Hove, near Brighton, owned by the same education group who owned the autistic unit I was going to college through. We went to visit that supported living house one day in December. My parents were very keen on it for me, since they had Sky TV in the lounge and they helped their residents get into university and eventually get jobs. I, however, wasn't keen. The house was owned by the same education group as the place I was going to at the time, whose policies I don't agree with, the restrictions on computer use particularly. Not only was the internet censored, but they didn't allow the use of webcams except for at one particular place they ran somewhere in the country. Despite my refusal to move there, my parents really wanted me to. We continued to bicker about this throughout what was left of the college year, and I ranted about it many times to the students and staff at my boarding house. At one point nearer the end of the college year, my parents pulled me out of college for a week for a Monday to Friday trial run at the place in Hove. One of the staff members there was a former employee at the boarding school I went to, and even remembered me being one of the students. Each day I went into town with staff and a few of the residents. We would look in shops and have a drink and snack break. For the majority of my time inside the house, I didn't engage with the other residents. I was in my room watching TV and using my portable electronic devices. On the plus side, I did finally get to see the David Seaman and Al Murray episodes of CITV's Storytime with Celebrity Guests show, Bookaboo, a show I didn't get much of a chance to watch in college. The college year ended with me and everyone in my class completing the BTEC First Diploma in Business course, and with it being my final year, I said goodbye to everyone in the autistic unit. They even made me a memory book, which I still have in my possession today. Before we go further, you may have noticed that I showed next to nothing in the way of my own photos from during my experience at college. Not only did I not have a way of getting photos off a Motorola V500, Samsung D600 or Motorola Pebble onto a computer, meaning that it wasn't until I got a GoCam for my PSP that I had a digital camera I could back up photos from. But my lack of enthusiasm for continued boarding meant I wasn't in much of a mood to take pictures. If I did get to go to college locally, like I wanted, I would have asked my parents to get me a proper digital camera beforehand so I could take pictures and, if I'm extra lucky, video, documenting my college experience, which I would have had more of a record of today.
Since the last update to this video, it came to my attention that the Samsung D600 phone I had for most of 2007 actually did have a microSD slot. That would have been nice to know so I could back up my photos and videos and still have them even after the phone died. Then again, the PSP GoCam, despite being lower resolution, did film in a format I knew I could use with Windows Movie Maker, and the convenience of being able to do it all with one of my most used gaming devices at the time was nice. On top of all that, buying a microSD card for my D600 would have added to the need I already had to buy a higher capacity memory stick for my PSP. Shortly into the summer break, my then care manager came to visit. She had a word with my parents and I, and in the process told us she found another care home where I could live, and it was much closer to home.
We went for a visit. It wasn't perfect. The residents were kinda like the lot I went to boarding school with. They didn't have Sky TV, but what made me choose it over the place in Hove was that it was not owned by the education group who owned that place and the place I went to college through. So no more of those policies I didn't agree with. And they had Wi-Fi, with no censorship. Uncensored internet after years of putting up with the strict computer policies I had to endure through my school and college years? Sign me up.
Why would I want to move to a faraway place with censored internet, just as I had to put up with at school and college, when I could instead move to a place much closer to home, where the internet is not censored?
In August, I got to trial the house I wanted to move to for Monday to Thursday one week. I knew it wasn't going to be perfect going into it, but at the same time, it was, in my view, a big upgrade over the place my parents wanted me to move to. Me going to that nearby care home was made official later that month, and I moved in on September 1st. My parents even got me a laptop for when I moved in. Not to go into too much detail, but my first 2 and a bit years at that care home were really good. I didn't get on with many of the residents, but I did still make some good friends. We went on days out to zoos and theme parks, regular visits to local places such as the leisure centre and the library, the occasional cinema trip, and many more good times. I even got to learn to cross the road, a skill I didn't have before due to my prior lack of spatial awareness. At one point, one of my college friends told me during a phone conversation that after listening to my rants, she looked at the place in Hove my parents wanted me to move to, but they rejected her for being too able. Sadly, life at the care home I did move into started to turn bad, mainly because they started turning the Wi-Fi off at 10:30 p.m. nightly following the arrival of an irresponsible new resident in late 2011. I felt the need to move on. They owned 2 flats, one of which they let me move into in November 2013, sharing with someone else who lived in the main house until sometime either before or after I moved in. Life in the flat was good. I finally got my own internet and Sky TV installed after my move-in was made official following an unfortunate delay. I built on my independent living skills, but things went wrong in later years. We were moved to another flat following a noise complaint in late 2016. I developed anger issues causing my flatmate to move out, and after the owners of the care home and flats sold the whole establishment to a major care provider nearer the end of the 2010s, this major care provider declared my flat a fire risk because the only way out from upstairs was through the kitchen. They moved me to an assisted living house,
roughly half an hour away. Thankfully, nearly 4 years after I was forced away to a care home, roughly half an hour from where I was living before,
I did get to move into another supported living flat, not too far from my parents' house. Life there was good. I did have a flatmate, but he moved out a year after I moved in. And because my care bill went up by an unacceptable amount shortly after summer's end, I had to move back in with my parents just before Christmas. And I'm still living with them at the time of this upload. Hopefully I'll get to move out again soon, but I'll only agree to it if my new monthly bills won't bankrupt me. Despite my current living situation not being ideal, my library volunteer work is still going strong after 13.5 years, and I'm doing a new art course later this year. I know we shouldn't dwell on the past, but having a learning disability should not mean having to go far away for your education and having to abide by rules not in place at home. Having a learning disability should mean less rules, not more. Sorry if I'm not being grammatically correct here, but at home, my parents were a bit strict towards my brother, but a number of the rules they applied to him, they didn't apply to me because of my learning disability. Learning disability or not, you should still be able to get an education locally, even if it means strings having to be pulled here and there. Even if you can do a GCSE in math, but not in English, you still have a chance at a good future. The second one of my 2 schools did things for boarding students in a way that seemed to force lifestyle choices on us. It is true that a lot of autistic children and teenagers do like to go on outdoor activities, but no 2 autistic people are alike. Some of us would rather play video games and watch cartoons, and need our preferences respected. Especially if your home has extra channels TV, the latest console, and or a subscription to an online gaming service, you should be able to use them after a long day of school or college. If someone is deprived the chance to learn locally and forced to board and outside school hours forced to live by stricter rules than at home, especially for years on end, it could scar them into adulthood. I've made some wrong turns here and there in life. Even though my time as a boarding student has left a large permanent stain on my past. You only get to be a teenager once, you need to make it count, but sadly I couldn't. Thankfully, the school where I boarded closed their boarding facilities in 2017. I hear they did so as they were too much work for their staff. Too bad that closure was 11 to 18 years too late. Let's just be thankful fewer young people will have to, and have had to, go through what I was forced to go through.
If I had only brought my nicey-nicey characteristics from infants over to juniors, there's a good chance I'd be in a different position today. I could have still had my I don't care moments, such as during school assemblies, but we all need I don't care moments. They are part of life. Also, over the years since I left college, I have continued to mainly watch TV shows primarily aimed at preteens, and some adult comedy shows too. After all, if I didn't continue to watch kids' shows into adulthood, why would I have talked about The Loud House at the start of this video? I am still a big fan of The Simpsons and Family Guy, but I did eventually catch on to both shows' seasonal rot. I do still enjoy re-watching episodes of these shows, each from their first decade and a bit, but later episodes that I enjoyed when they were new don't hold up so well. Some of them I didn't even enjoy when they were new. Don't get me started on Screams of Silence. Eventually, I decided to stop watching new episodes of both shows due to how bad they had gotten. I made The Simpsons Guy my last Family Guy episode,
and Orange is the New Yellow, my last Simpsons episode.
I am still an avid gamer to this day, and I continue to take pride in my console collection. Unfortunately, the prices of certain games have gone up over the years, so I really do hope I can figure out what I can do for a job so I can eventually afford copies of my own. Glad I got to play Zelda 4 Swords Adventures, Mario Party 6, and Mario Party 7 in college.
The autistic unit I went to college through closed in 2019. A friend told me a year or so after the closure. If I've heard correctly, the closure was most likely
due to there now being more places where able autistic folk can get a suitable education locally. Before I go, I would like to reiterate that being autistic doesn't mean you should be given unfair treatment, and I feel I must also add, if you are considering a job working in a school or college,
there is always a chance you'll be working with students with learning disabilities.
You must adapt, realise that they may not like the same things as other people their age, and accept them for it. Do not try to change them. Thanks for watching.